Right, so censorship and the battle against online misinformation is something we've seen a lot of in the news, particularly that coming from alternative media, chiefly because they're the ones often being targeted by such things when they're used in a dishonest way, along with the platforms that host them. But one of the most prevalent online media censorship groups globally, and notably its CEO, actually have direct links to MPs in this country and even to shadow ministers within Keir Starmer's Labour as well as the Conservative Party, and not least of which accusations of taking cash in return for pushing censorship. So what does that say about it? What danger does that present to those of us trying to get the truth out that our mainstream media need not worry about their own platforms, but those smaller outlets absolutely do? Alternative media has sprung into being and been thrust into relevance because it challenges the old establishment-friendly media outlets owned by the Rupert Murdochs of this world. It offers insight into stories that don't often get told, and it is particularly telling that it is one such alternative outlet that has broken this story, because we need to fight this or face a world where we're dumbed down again, with only selected voices being chosen to report on what they consider passes for news. Right, so let's begin with this online censorship group then. You may have heard of them, you may not have, but they're called the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, the CCDH. And they came into being coming up on 5 years ago here in the UK as a campaign group to counter exactly what it says on the tin, digital hate, or what passes for it in their view. They campaign on social media platforms chiefly, or for social media platforms to change their wicked ways, so to speak, but other big tech firms too, to stop providing services to those who are using their platforms in order to promote hate or disinformation. And from that perspective alone, it seems like a perfectly fine, reasonable goal, doesn't it? We know neo-Nazis use these platforms and anti-vaxxers and the likes on social media to promote their ideas, and campaigning for the likes of Facebook and Twitter to not continue to permit such things on their platform is entirely reasonable. Free speech is one thing, but it has to be used responsibly, does it not? And these things are harmful and hurtful and false, and we don't want to live in a world where such things are promoted, do we? Or if you're watching this and you do, boy, you're going to hate this channel. Turn away now. The trouble is, though, such entities are also inherently political, and when politics comes into it, such an organisation may end up being weaponised against those trying to tell a few home truths, getting turned on. And when you consider the track record of the CCDH's CEO, this is something that becomes actually very relevant indeed. The CCDH was started up by a chap called Imran Ahmed. Now, Ahmed was at the centre of an infamous Labour Party story from a little while ago concerning right-wing Wallasey Labour MP Angela Eagle and a story of a brick that was allegedly thrown through her window in a homophobic hate attack that just happened to coincide with her constituency Labour Party moving to deselect her as their MP and choose somebody else. Brickgate. Do you remember Brickgate being in the news? Well, Ahmed at the time was Angela Eagle's communications director. To cut a long and frankly ridiculous disinformation story short, there was no brick. The window broken was in a public stairwell in the same building as Eagle's office, not an office window of hers itself. The whole affair was designed to paint her local Corbyn-supporting party as homophobic, despite, incidentally, the CLP chair's daughter getting married to a woman the day after these allegations got made. But of course, it all culminated in Eagle's CLP getting suspended, shut down in effect, thus saving her from deselection, and of course she remains their MP to this day. More detail on this incident, however, came up in the now infamous Labour Leaks report, when the head of disputes, then later whistleblower on John Ware's Panorama hit job on Corbyn, remember that Panorama, I was talking about it in a video the other day, the chap in question, Sam Matthews, said of the suspension as written in the Leaks report itself, "I have every sympathy for the fact that Angela is still in a difficult situation, as they are properly organised in her constituency. My worry is that based on track record, no matter how much time we give Angela," in practice Imran, "to organise, so little work will go into it that we'll end up getting asked to extend it further and further." At the moment, Imran, an Eagle staffer at the time, wants the suspension to remain in place until at least November, but I would be really worried about turning up to disputes in October and having to report that Wallasey was still suspended because they haven't held an annual general meeting yet. The Imran being referred to there was Imran Ahmed, driving to extend the results of a smear, of disinformation himself, over an incident in Wallasey that never happened, looking to extend that further so he can subvert local party democracy and save Angela Eagle's bacon. with the assistance of Labour HQ, as it was, the same people who worked so hard to bring down Jeremy Corbyn, no less. So is he the sort of person you would trust to head up an organisation that seeks to challenge disinformation online? Well, I certainly know how I feel about that. He certainly seems to know a thing or two about sowing disinformation based on all of this, doesn't he? But it wasn't his only alleged foray into misleading people. Some of you who might have also heard about another infamous organisation called Stop Funding Fake News. Now, this was supposedly a grassroots-led organisation that went after alternative news outlets, seeking to convince their advertisers to pull their funding from certain outlets in order to bring them down. One of the more well-known targets of this was the Canary, their advertisers being heavily targeted, despite them being a left-wing outlet, a small outlet seeking to get the word out that mainstream news won't cover, and of course the likes of Rachel Riley became involved in supporting Stop Funding Fake News. You can guess the type of thing she was accusing people of. Well, it turns out they weren't grassroots-led at all, as eventually Imran Ahmed was forced to admit he'd been behind that one as well. Well, Ahmed's latest adventure, the CCDH, has been far more successful for him, but in light of what you've read here, would you trust it? By 2021, the CCDH had set up shop in Washington, D.C. and was involving itself in US politics. Chiefly, it had been disseminating Republican Party claims and Trump speak, but in March of 2021, they hit the US political landscape running with a report about online misinformation happening over there. And this is where a US alt media outlet picked all of this up. A media platform called The Tablet, which ironically, given the Rachel Riley mention a moment ago, is a US Jewish magazine. At this point, the CCDH were running stories regarding misinformation surrounding COVID. It drew the attention of the then CEOs at Twitter, since the report named several Twitter accounts and led Twitter to take action against those accounts, which happened to include people such as Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the nephew of JFK. Later on, the Biden administration quoted the report to attack Facebook, claiming 12 accounts were responsible for 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation there, and accused the platform of undermining federal government policy on this. Facebook in turn attacked the report for being free of evidence, not explaining how they had come by their numbers and their conclusions. Twitter, of course, has come under new management these days, now known as X, and run by Elon Musk, who has been repeatedly blamed for platforming hate speech, is now suing the CCDH over its claims against him, which will make for interesting reading, since the CCDH would very much now need to pony up the evidence they say they have, that Facebook have already said they do not. What CCDH does have, though, is after its first year operating in the US, it had made $1.5 million, of which $1.1 million came from a single anonymous donor. So who is it taking cash from with cash like that to spare? And what are they paying for? All these social media outlets are poor at clamping down on hate speech, on false narratives, on abusive and harmful claims. We can all criticise them, and justifiably so. But we've also seen how the CCDH has helped shape government policy in the US by attacking critics of the current administration, as well as attack the platforms we alt media outlets rely on to do what we do. US COVID policy was shaped by disseminating and discrediting critics of the Biden administration. Equally, the guy behind it, Ahmed, was doing likewise here in the UK as a Labour MP's employee. Others who have been involved in the CCDH include Tory MP Damien Collins, as well as Morgan McSweeney, Keir Starmer's former Chief of Staff. Others include Kirsty McNeil, who worked for Gordon Brown when he was Prime Minister, and is now a Scottish Labour parliamentary candidate. How can an organisation that purports to challenge false narratives possibly do so when it is blatantly, obviously, too close to the biggest liars of them all of our ruddy politicians? You can imagine what an authoritarian like Keir Starmer would like to do to gag those of us who call out his lies, his misinformation and his diktat. But once in power, will he actively embark on a systematic shutting down of dissent when he has party loyalists like Ahmed working behind the scenes of opaquely funded organisations that have already been observed taking down those who challenge governmental policy and government interests? It's a bit of a scary thought, isn't it? What do you make of this story, though? Are you surprised that former Labour staffers are lurking in the shadows and are behind some of these sort of organisations? Or is it totally expected? Should we as independent media and you as our audiences be duly concerned about this? Do they actually have a point? But at which point do you police the platforms that we all use, in which case? Do let me know your thoughts on this story in the comments below. Do support your favourite independent media as well if you can afford to without hardship, be that me or somebody else. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where Keir Starmer the liar trended last week. So how much of that would he get away with if he has an organisation calling people out who are calling out his lies? Should he ever reach power? Well, that's a bit of a headache to try and think about, isn't it? The groundwork is there. Perhaps Elon Musk will do us all a favour in court and take them to the cleaners, but we can't rely on that. I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.